Greetings and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching Defining the Lync Server 2013 Topology. In this video presentation, we are going to see how to design a topology using the Lync Server 2013 Topology Builder. We're also going to see how to take that topology and to publish it into the Central Management Store, better known as CMS. Well, what exactly is CMS, the Central Management Store, and how do we interact with it? With Microsoft Lync Server 2013, it is using a very similar format to the structure that we had for our database as like what we had with Lync Server 2010. Microsoft has moved away or shifted away from storing information inside of the configuration partition of AD. We're now using Microsoft SQL Server to store the topology information for your Lync infrastructure in your environment. Back with the older versions of Office Communication Server, Microsoft stored a lot of information inside of WMI and also inside of AD. But there were a lot of complaints by administrators that there were delays in replication. So if I was opening up an administration console and I connected to a server in one site, I wasn't seeing the same thing that I would see if I connected to another server in another site. And that's because Active Directory replication at a minimum can only replicate within 15-minute intervals. And if you look at the defaults for inter-site replication, it's measured in 3 hours. So Microsoft has moved over to a more efficient technique where we're storing information inside of a SQL Server database. The database is called XTS MDF, and every Microsoft Lync server within your environment will maintain a local copy of the topology information in their local instance of the Central Management Store. So what we typically have is one server that is a CMS, Central Management Server, and that is typically the first server that you set up in your environment. And that CMS server is going to handle the interaction with the backend SQL database. And then all your other servers will get a copy of that information. So what you're going to find in your environment is that your servers will use a share, so the format // server name /XDS-replica. So that share is used for replication of the XDS database content, or CMS, amongst the servers within your environment. So what exactly is stored inside of my CMS database? Well, the CMS database maintains your topology information, it maintains configuration settings, and also policies. So when we make changes to our topology with the Topology Builder, or if we make configuration changes or policy changes through the control panel or the Lync Server Management Shell, a lot of this information is getting stored inside of CMS and replicated amongst the different servers, and maintained inside of your local SQL Server 64-bit Express Edition, which runs on every server within the environment. Before we can deploy Microsoft Lync Server 2013, we have to define our topology inside of a tool called the Topology Builder. The Topology Builder is the tool that we will use to define our sites, our pools, and the servers. Whether it's servers participating in a front-end pool, Mediation Server configuration, or even our gateways. Now keep in mind that the Topology Builder is the tool that you have to use to originally author your topology. So you cannot even install Lync until you have your topology defined and then published over to our Central Management Store. As we go through our demonstration, when we go to the properties for our pool, underneath the resiliency settings, you'll notice a new feature. We now have the ability to enable pool peering. If you enable pool peering, it allows your pools to function as backup registrars to each other. So in our case, we have 2 pools, one in Scottsdale and one in Phoenix. If I enable the pools to be set up in a peered design, if a client goes to register with its configured pool, such as Scottsdale, if that pool is not available, your client can then register with the backup registrar pool over in Phoenix. Now, if the client registers with the backup registrar pool in an automatic process, your clients then function in a reduced functionality state. So this is similar to what we had with Lync Server 2010. When your client powers up, they register with their pool, but it's not available, so they fail over to the backup registrar. We have to remember that there's a lot of user-homed data only over in your pool, such as your contact information, your presence information. Well, with Lync Server 2013, when you enable pool peering, this information is now replicated to the other pool. So if a client fails over to the other pool automatically, they function in a reduced functionality state with limited access to their user-home data. But the administrator can invoke a manual failover. So we fail the clients over to the other pool manually, and the clients then start to use the user home data over on the other pool. So they then have full functionality on the client. so they're not running in their reduced functionality state. Another very important enhancement that we have with Lync 2013 is the ability to use SQL mirroring for your back-end SQL servers. Now, we're going to be using the Enterprise Edition of Microsoft Lync because of the number of users that we have at Carve Rock Fitness. And in order to provide high availability when you're using the Enterprise Edition, you've got to have at least 3 servers in a pool. So Microsoft recommends at least 3 servers in an enterprise pool. If you're going to have only 2 servers, they recommend that you go with the Standard Edition. Well, what exactly does SQL mirroring allow me to do? It allows me to store content on multiple SQL servers. This is a feature that was not available with Lync Server 2010. At Carve Rock Fitness, we have a data center in Scottsdale, and we also have another data center over in Phoenix. And what we're looking at doing is setting up a pool in each location, and we're going to peer those pools. But we're also going to provide redundancy with the SQL Server data with SQL mirroring. Well, I know what you're thinking. The prior version of Lync allowed us to use clustering of SQL. Well, the problem with clustering is that if you wanted to geographically disperse your data, like in the case of a geo cluster, it required that your SQL servers were on the same VLAN. So I had 2 physical locations, Scottsdale and Phoenix, and I had to use a stretched VLAN in order to support the clustering. Well, with SQL mirroring, that is not the case. We don't have to use stretched VLANs anymore. From inside of the Topology Builder, after we go in and we define a site, we're then going to be prompted to define a pool, and a pool can be either the Standard Edition or the Enterprise Edition. With the Standard Edition of Microsoft Lync, we do not use a separate SQL Server on the back end. You will be using the SQL Server 64-bit Express Edition locally on your server to host your CMS. With the Enterprise Edition of Microsoft Lync, we have the ability to set up multiple servers in a pool. So if one of your servers goes down, well, that's okay because we now have other servers that can handle the load. It provides a true higher level of availability to your application services for your clients. With the Enterprise Edition of Lync, we have to use a back-end SQL server, another server running SQL, to maintain a copy of CMS. And then every server in the pool will host a local copy of CMS on their local instance of SQL Server 64-bit Express Edition. Now, one of the questions I always have, do we have to use the Enterprise Edition of Microsoft Lync to use Enterprise Voice? And the answer to that is no. Enterprise Voice is your voice over IP, and if you only have one server and that server goes down, that also means the ability to make and receive phone calls is going to go down with it. So if you are using voice over IP or Enterprise Voice, you may want to take a look at either using Standard Edition in a peer design or having multiple servers in a pool. Both of these designs will provide higher availability and can maintain a dial tone where in cases where a single Standard Edition will not. Now, as we define our topology with Lync 2013, we're also going to have to define simple URLs. Simple URLs are used to connect over to Microsoft Lync 2013 for different situations. Well, we have an administrative simple URL, which is used to connect over to the control panel, and that's only exposed internally. We also have a dial-in simple URL, which is used to connect over to the dial-in conferencing web page. This allows me to see the different dial-in conferencing numbers, the languages supported by those numbers, and the regions that they're associated with. We also have the meet simple URL, which is used to comprise the link used to join into meetings. So if I send you a meeting request, you'll see my meet simple URL with my alias and the conference ID appended to it. Now, from within the Topology Builder, we also have to define the server that is going to be your central management server. The central management server is kind of like the master server for the database. It is the server that maintains the updates to the SQL database and also the replication out to the other servers within your Lync 2013 environment. The central management server is typically installed on your first Lync server within your environment. We also have the ability to move that role to another server if it's required. After we're done making our modifications inside of the Topology Builder, if you want those changes to affect your environment, you have to push those changes back into SQL or back into CMS. Now, if you're creating your topology for the first time and you've never published information over to CMS, well, you can author your topology as a local administrator or as a local user. You don't have to have any special credentials to create a topology. Once you have created your initial topology, or maybe you've pulled your topology out of production and you make some changes to it off of your local XML file, when you want to push those changes back into the production environment, you have to use the Topology Builder and you will publish the topology. If I'm creating my initial topology in the Topology Builder, I have to define where my backend SQL server is so that when I publish my topology, my system knows where to push that data to. if I have a production environment where I want to make some changes to my existing CMS, when you open up your Topology Builder, you can pull in a copy of CMS from the production environment, and then you're working off of a local file. The Topology Builder doesn't work on the database directly. It works off of a copy of the data within a local XML file. So if I make any modifications to my topology, when I want to push them back into production, I have to publish the topology and publish that information back into the central management store. In this demonstration, we're going to see how to make modifications to our topology and how to author the original topology with our Topology Builder. We're also going to see how to publish the topology over to the central management store. So let's open up our Topology Builder. And when we open up the Topology Builder, we have three choices. We can download the topology from the existing deployment. This is great when you want to make a change to your existing environment. We can also open the topology from a local file. Like, for example, if you are already working on a topology and you want to make some changes to your existing work in progress. You can also create a brand new topology from scratch, which is what we're going to do. When I create my topology, we're prompted to give that topology file a name. I'll call mine install demo. And then we're prompted to identify the primary SIP domain of our organization. And we're using carverockfitness.com. And then we'll click on Next. And if we're using any additional SIP domains, this is where we would provide them. So if you worked for an organization that was supporting more than one domain namespace, this is where you could provide the additional namespace support. Now, CarveRock Fitness is going to be supporting additional namespaces in the future, but for right now, we'll leave it just like it is. We can make some changes later on. On our next slide, we define our first site. Every deployment has to have at least one site, and then inside of your site, you typically define your pool or your pools. My site is called Scottsdale, and that's where our headquarters are in Scottsdale, Arizona. And here my description is corporate location. And then we'll click on Next. On the next slide, we define our city, state, and our country code. So here my city is Scottsdale. We're in Arizona, and the country code is +1. On the next slide, it reads, your new topology was successfully defined. Before you publish the topology, you must define at least one front-end pool. If you are ready now to do that, select the checkbox below and then click on Finish. So I'm going to leave it just like this, and it's going to walk me through a wizard to create a pool. So here we'll click on Finish, and then it opens up my Define the New Front-End Pool wizard. We'll click on Next, and then we're prompted for the name of the pool. At CarveRock Fitness, we're looking for a higher level of availability because we have to be able to support voice over IP and also our conferencing, and we want to make sure that they're always available. So the name of our pool is going to be pool.carverockfitness.com. Now with our namespace of pool.carverockfitness.com, we're going to have to support that on our certificates, and we also have to support that on DNS. So if any traffic is getting routed over to pool.carverockfitness.com, it is going to have to get routed over to my front-end pool. So in my case, I'm going to stick with Enterprise Edition Front-End Pool. Again, here you can see that we can have up to 20 computers in a pool. When you're dealing with the Standard Edition, it's one server per pool. Now, if you go with the Enterprise Edition, you then have to define the name of the servers in the pool. So we'll click on Next. I've got 3 servers in my front-end pool, CRF-FE1, CRF-FE2, and CRF-FE3.carverockfitness.com. So let's start off with our first one. Then we'll click on Add. So here you can see that I've added the names of my 3 servers into the topology for the pool, and then we'll click on Next. On our next slide, we can select the features that we're going to be using within the enterprise. Keep in mind that instant messaging and presence are always enabled by default when you set up a pool. So at CarveRock Fitness, we're going to use conferencing, including audio, video, and app sharing. We're going to have support for dial-in PSTN conferencing, enterprise voice, which is our voice over IP. We have call admission control, which is our bandwidth management feature through the network policy services. We also have support for archiving and monitoring. On the next property sheet, I'm being prompted for the location of my mediation server. As you remember, the mediation server role is the role that communicates with your gateway, your IP PSTN gateway, your IP-based PBX, or possibly your session border controller for a SIP trunk provider. The Mediation Server can be co-located on your front-end servers in a pool. It can also be a separate dedicated box. Now, at CarveRock Fitness, we're going to go with co-located mediation servers because we've only got about 10,000 clients in the environment. We'll be able to support that on our front-end servers without a problem. Let's click on Next. On the next property sheet, I'm prompted to define if I want to set up an edge pool relationship. The Microsoft Lync Server 2013 Edge services provide connectivity to the Internet for public instant messaging, for XMPP support, for federation relationships with other organizations, and also for roaming users, somebody outside of your organization's boundaries that just wants to connect in to authenticate with Lync. We are going to be using the Edge services at CarveRock Fitness, but we don't have it set up yet, so we're not going to worry about that now. We'll add it into our topology later. On the next slide, we define where we want to host our SQL Server information. With the Enterprise Edition of Microsoft Lync, we have to use a back-end SQL Server. And as you'll notice here, we can also define if we want to use SQL Server mirroring. And if you do, where is that SQL store going to be located? Now, for automatic failover capabilities, we can also incorporate a SQL Server mirror witness. Here, in my case, I'm going to create a brand new SQL Server store. And here we have crf sql1.carverockfitness.com. And as you'll notice down below, I'm going to use the default instance. And then here, if I'm going to be using mirroring, I can define the port that I'm going to use for mirroring. For now, we'll leave that blank. We're not going to mirror right now. But if you did mirror, you could specify where your mirrored store is going to be located. We'll click on Next. On the next property sheet, we define the file store location. The Enterprise Edition of Lync requires a network file share, and that is used by these services participating in a pool to maintain application content. You've got to remember that you've got a bunch of servers working together as an array, and they need to be able to share information for the app services. And that's done through our file share. So here I'm going to define a new file store, and the name of my file server is crf fileserver.carverockfitness.com. And then the name of my file share is called appshare, $. It's a hidden share. And then we'll click on Next. On the next property sheet, we specify the web services URL. Now, when you set up multiple servers in a pool, the pool has the ability to route the traffic across the different servers in the pool and load balance the traffic using hardware load balancing and DNS load balancing. Now, DNS-based load balancing came out with Lync 2010. And the problem with DNS-based load balancing is that it's only used to support SIP traffic in your media streaming traffic. It is not supported for web-based traffic or your DCOM traffic. In our case, we are going to be using DNS-based load balancing. You'll notice that it says override the internal web services pool FQDN for web services. I have my regular traffic going over to pool.carverockfitness.com, but when you go to connect over to the web-based traffic, I don't want that traffic to go to the pool directly. I need it to go to the hardware-based load balancing appliance that we're going to deploy. So inside of DNS, traffic for pool.carverockfitness.com will go directly over to the front-end servers. We're going to set up round-robin DNS support on the DNS side to route that traffic. But for traffic going over to the web services, I have to come up with another name to route that traffic over to my HLB appliance. So here I'm going to provide my name. Here I have link web int for internal.carverockfitness.com. Then we'll click on Next. On the next property sheet, we can associate the Microsoft Lync 2013 environment with an Office web app server. This allows you to have more robust PowerPoint presentations in a conference. It includes animations, slide transitions, embedded video, and also it provides the ability for users to navigate slides independently of the slide presentation. So here we'll click on New. I have OWA, that's my Office web app server, .carverockfitness.com. And you'll notice that it automatically appends the Office web app server discovery URL. We'll click on Next. On the next slide, I define the archiving SQL Server store. Now, my SQL Server store that I'm going to use for archiving is the same exact server that I'm going to be using for my topology. crfsql1.carverockfitness.com, and I'm using the default instance. And again here you can see that I can set up mirroring and also if I want to use a mirrored witness for automatic failover. On the next slide I have the same thing, but it's for the monitoring of SQL. Again, with our monitoring services we have a couple of databases. We've got the quality of metrics and also the call detail records database, and they need to be maintained on a SQL Server store as well. And again, we're going to put that on our same SQL Server and then click on Finish. Now from inside of the Topology Builder, as I open up my topology, you can see that I now have my site called Scottsdale. I've got Lync Server 2010, Lync Server 2013. If I go down to my Lync Server 2013 pool, I should be able to see my different servers within the pool. If I open up the properties for the pool, here's where I can see a lot of the settings that I've just defined. Down below I have features and functionality. Conferencing is enabled, dial-in PSTN conferencing, and enterprise voice. You can also see that I've got my Lync server using a backend SQL server, crfsql1.carverockfitness.com. Next you can see I have my archiving store, my monitoring store. You can see the information regarding my network file share used across the pool. I have my OS server. And then down below, if I wanted to set up backup resiliency by defining a backup registrar pool, here's where I can provide that functionality. Now again, I don't have my other pool set up yet, but later on we can go back in here and we can make those changes as required. Finally, at the bottom of the console, you can see my internal web services link, the namespace that I'm going to use to connect over to the web services inside of my environment. I have my external web services link, which is going to be routable through a reverse proxy server. So if you're on the internet and you go to connect over to our pool for web services, for example, to download an address book or expanding a distribution list, well, you got to come in through web services for that, and you would connect in coming in through a reverse proxy server, like maybe Forefront TMG or ISO or maybe a Citrix appliance. Finally, at the bottom of the console, this is where I define my mediation server settings and the ports that I'm going to use for incoming calls coming in off of my gateways or my PBX. Now, if I go up to the properties for my Lync server and I right-click, and here I'm going to edit the properties, and now you can see that I can define additional supported SIP domains. So later on, if we purchase other companies, or if CarveRock Fitness goes on some other ventures with some of the other products that we produce, we can define the additional SIP domains supported by Microsoft Lync. As we scroll down a little bit, here's where you can see the simple URLs that we're going to be using. Now, the dial-in simple URL is perfect, https://dialin.carverockfitness.com. When it comes to your dial-in simple URL, we can use one dial-in simple URL for all the different SIP domains that we support. Now, right now we only have one, but in the future that might expand. When it comes to your meet simple URLs, we have to have a meet simple URL for each SIP domain that we're supporting within the environment. So right now we're only using carverockfitness.com, so we're going to go with https://meet.carverockfitness.com. Now keep in mind that if I do support additional SIP domains, I will have to provide additional meet simple URLs for those SIP domains. And if you remember, these are used to join into a meeting. So if I were to send you a meeting request right now from Lync, you would get a link that looked like this, but then at the end you would see my alias and also the conference identification. Now finally at the bottom of the console, I also have my administrative access URL, and this is a link that's used to connect over to the pool for administration coming in through the control panel. Now for the dial-in, the meet, and also the administrative access URL, I'm going to have to make sure that internally my DNS server routes this traffic over to my front-end pool. For traffic coming in externally from the internet, I don't have to worry about the administrative access URL, but I do want to make sure that my dial-in and my meet simple URLs route to the reverse proxy server so that that traffic can get routed over to the front-end pool to the web services. But let's provide my administrative access simple URL. So here I'm going to have https://admin.carverockfitness.com. And again, we'll take care of the DNS later. We'll click OK. So as you can see, I've created a site called Scottsdale. I've also created a pool within inside of Scottsdale under Lync Server 2013. My enterprise pool has 3 servers. I've also defined my administrative simple URLs. Now what I'm going to do is publish my topology to CMS, and we'll see what it looks like when you take your topology and you push it over to your backend SQL server. So to publish the topology into the central management store, we're going to go up here to Lync Server. We'll right-click, and you'll notice the option to publish the topology. When you open up your Publish Topology wizard, you have some general information that you may want to read if it's your first time using this. We'll click on Next, and you can see here it reads, please wait while the Topology Builder tries to publish your topology over to your configured Central Management Store, CMS. So here you can see that I've published my topology. I've downloaded the topology. I'm seeing a bunch of successful messages, and things look great. So here I'm going to click on Finish, and we're done with the demonstration. So I hope you've enjoyed the demonstration, and we'll see you in the next video.